It's time once again to talk about video games. But what video games are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about Genesis Sega games. Can you dig it?
Genesis does. Genesis does. Genesis does. Genesis does. Genesis does.
Now, my previous lists were fueled in a large part from nostalgia. I don't have that issue with the Sega Genesis. Now, I do have nostalgia for a few games that I have on this list. However, a lot of these were discovered as an adult collector. You see, I didn't have a Sega Genesis back in the day. My sister ended up getting one, and my cousin Chris ended up getting one, so occasionally we would rent games for those. But I was always a Nintendo fanboy. In fact, when my cousin and my sister got a Sega Genesis, I felt betrayed. I thought, why would you do that? Why would you get the rival system? Now, I was dumb, I have to admit, because what's the point of the family having several Super Nintendos, okay? So why not just get another system completely? That way you can rent an entire different library. I wasn't thinking like that. I was blinded by fanboy rage, but I soon got over it because I realized there were some pretty good games for the Sega Genesis as well. So with my oh-so-brief history of the Sega Genesis out of the way, let's get to the list of games that I consider the best. Now, the first game on the list, number 10, goes... There's a pool party going on next door. So if you hear screaming and children yelling and old ladies yelling, that's why. But we're gonna get through this video. Anyway, number 10 goes to Alien 3. This was on a list already, in fact. I'm not gonna go too in-depth about this game. Basically, each stage is timed, and you have to get through it, not knowing where you're going, to rescue all the imprisoned your colleagues or whatever. You have a time limit, and as soon as this time limit expires, they're going to expire. And honestly, it's kind of cool because you get to see the aliens pop out of their stomach. And actually, there were times when I was playing this game, because we rented this, Chris rented it, and he ended up getting in trouble because it was very graphic. His mom was like, "Why are you renting games where aliens come out of their stomach?" And it was cool because we would just sit there and let the timer run out just so we could see, like, it was great. But anyway, this isn't a game that is overly great, but I have it on my top 10 list just simply because of nostalgia. And I think that's pretty much the only game on this list that's on here because I do have pretty good memories. Well, there's one more. The next one, number 9, goes to a franchise that was really treated badly when it came to getting very good, any sort of decent game out of it, especially on the Nintendo Entertainment System. I like the movie, but I could never play a decent game until this came out on the Genesis, and that's Ghostbusters. You can almost think of this game as a sequel to it is a sequel to the movie, maybe even a better sequel than the actual Ghostbusters 2. Essentially, the Ghostbusters are down on their luck, and well, as luck would have it, a bunch of calls start coming in because chaos breaks out, and it's up to you as the Ghostbusters to save the day once again. It's basically a run and gun. You're going through all these different areas, one being a creepy mansion, another being a high-rise, a building on fire, and you are essentially just busting ghosts. I mean, it's much more of a fun game. It's much more of a game than the NES versions ever would be. I love the cartoony graphics, the whimsical. It's whimsical. It's a whimsical game. That's perfect description. It's very whimsical, and it's just overall fun. Now it is tricky and it's got some hard parts in it, but for the most part, it's a really fun game, and I make sure that I play it at least during the Halloween season. Next up on my list is a game that I actually discovered recently. Yes, I discovered a game recently, and I've wondered where this has been all my life. How did I miss this? It quickly propelled itself into my top 10 of Genesis games. That's Alien Storm. Aliens! Aliens are invading the Earth, and of course, in proper video game fashion, it's up to you and your team of alien busters, that's actually the name, by the way, to save the day. The game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, although you're not punching, you're shooting. So would it be a run and gun, or it's a hybrid, I guess. But at its essence, it's a beat-em-up. And you can control 3 different players, and you essentially just go throughout the stage beating up, shooting aliens. It's simple, but it's fun. Actually, you can punch and kick, but you really want to shoot them more than anything. Now, throughout the side-scrolling stages, there are different parts where you can go into a building and enter a first-person view where you're blasting aliens POV style. I really like these parts because the gun's just constantly going and you're just blasting everything in sight. Of course, there's the occasional helpless victim human that you don't want to shoot, but aside that, you're just laying waste to everything, like the environment and everything, and it's just very satisfying. Besides the gameplay, which is great, I think the thing that really draws me into this game, it really has this sort of B-movies, 50s B-movie sci-fi vibe to it, and I think that's what they were going for because that's what I'm picking up. And the aliens themselves are very creative, very unique looking, and the bosses are really cool looking as well. Overall, just a really, really fun game, and it's got a great presentation to it. Gonna kill the UFO, gonna kill the UFO, cause there's aliens, and they're gonna probe us. Next up is a game that we rented. Well, Chris rented it and brought it over on a Friday night, and that's Road Rash. Now, I am not a racing fan. I like a few of the Mario Kart games and a few of the Burnout Paradise games, but for the most part, I would definitely not call myself a racing fan. It's just a genre that I never gravitated towards. But I don't know what it is about this game. Maybe it's the fact that you're riding a motorcycle and motorcycles are awesome. Maybe it's the fact that you can destroy people, just annihilate people by hitting them as they go by. Essentially the essence of the game. That's awesome as well. I don't know, it's just that intangible. I had fun with it, I guess you could say. I just simply had fun with this game, despite me not really liking racing games. So I guess that says a little something about it. Yet Chris, my cousin, had rented this game. He brought it over on a Friday night. He brought his Genesis over and we played it. And you know, I'm thinking to myself, dude, why? Why would you rent a racing game? What is... Because I knew he was into that stuff. He was into BMX and crap like that. I wasn't, and I was pissed off. I was like, dude, what are you doing to me, man? But I had fun with it. Like I said, it grew on me. To this day, I still enjoy playing it. So Road Rash is a good. All right, so we're moving on up to the next game on the rankings, and that's Sonic 2. Not Sonic 1, because the game! Sonic 2, however, is good. Actually, they're all right. I would definitely not call myself a Sonic fan. Don't kill me, Sonic fan base. However, I got a kick out of this game. I believe my sister had this game with her Genesis, and so I played it a lot as a kid, so this one has a little something special to me. I enjoy this game a lot more than the first Sonic and the third Sonic, and it's probably that nostalgia factor creeping in yet again on it. But I do like it, despite not being a really big Sonic fan. The thing that really gets on my nerves about Sonic is the whole thing is about go fast, go fast, go fast, go fast, go fast. But you can't go fast because you're always running into something. You're bouncing into stuff and then losing your rings. So it's like you gotta go fast, but then you can't go fast, but then you gotta go fast, but then you can't go fast. I don't know why this game's on my top 10, but I do like it. Especially the Aqua Zone, the underground Aqua Ruin Zone. I like that one. I know people don't like that because it's water and people hate water levels, but for whatever reason, I do like it. But I also really super like the casino stage. I mean, how could you not like that one? That one's a really cool stage in this game. So overall, I may not be the biggest Sonic fan. However, this game I do enjoy playing from time to time. I love me some Disney games. I love me some cartoon games. So when the Sega Genesis put out Castle of Illusion, I knew I had to play it. Castle of Illusion is a side-scrolling platformer where your main attack is, of course, a Mario-esque sort of bounce on enemies. Now your job is to rescue Minnie because some evil person, I forget who, but some evil person has kidnapped her and I believe they want to like steal her youth or something like that. I mean, it's a story. As story goes in games, I mean, really, who cares? It's all about that gameplay, it's all about that experience, and Castle of Illusion delivers on all accounts. This was not a game I played back when I was a kid. This was a game that, as I started collecting probably 10, 12 years ago, I ended up finding and playing it and thinking, wow, I really should have played this back in the day, because it's one of those games that you're like, oh, it really sucks that this passed me by. This is definitely one of those games where if I had played it back then, I think I'd absolutely just be in love with it now, like as in one of my top 10 games of all time on any system. But as it stands, I don't have the nostalgia for it, but I can recognize it as being just a masterpiece. It just kind of sucks you into that Disney fantasy world where all this magic can take place. Evil sorcerers, magicians, spiders and apples, and trees that have faces. It's got it all. So if you've never played Castle of Illusion, give it a shot, because even if you're not into cartoon games, this is a classic 16-bit gem. Next up on this glorious list is Castlevania Bloodlines. If you've seen my Super Nintendo and NES list, you know I'm a huge fan of the classic Castlevania series, and this game fits right in. Again, this was a game that I had never played back then, but I discovered it as a collector later on in life. I just missed out on so much of the Sega Genesis library growing up, and it's kind of sad, but this game I would have loved back then. It's got that same Castlevania feel that you've grown to love, with a few variations. Now, it doesn't have as many sub-weapons and you power them up with gems instead of hearts. However, you get to choose two different players. John, who has the whip, the traditional Castlevania whip, and then Eric, not 8-bit Eric, but Eric with the spear. Now, this goes just beyond having a different weapon to use against enemies. Some of the stages have branching paths. So if you have John, you could swing through gaps with your whip. If you have Eric, you can high jump and get to certain areas, and those areas might branch off and you can go a different route. So the game has great replayability. You can go and play the game as a different character and get to different stages. I personally find this game a little bit more difficult than Castlevania 4, and I'm not sure if it's just because it is more difficult or I just don't have as much experience with it, because I've been playing Castlevania 4 since I was like 14. So that could be it, but I do think it is a little bit more difficult. But hey, regardless, give it a shot because it is great. Now this one may be cheating just slightly. And I say that because TMNT 4 was on my Super Nintendo list, and now Hyperion Heist is on this one. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and go for it. Number 3 is Hyperion Heist. Yes, it's got a lot of similarities to Turtles in Time, obviously. However, it's a different game. It's a different game, different stages, range of different order. It's different. You can think of it almost as like a hack. You know, it's an early, like now they can take Super Mario World and hack it and make it look an entirely different game, and they can do that with a lot of different games. Well, this was like early hacking back in the day. Back in the day, they took a great game like Turtles in Time, and you know, it's great as that is, you know, if you played it so many times, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, can I get something different? So they took that and they took the sprites and they hacked it and they made Hyperion Heist out of it on the Genesis, because, you know, the Genesis is a second-class system to the Super Nintendo. Okay, that's not really what happened, but I'm just gonna stop talking. All right, number 2 on my list goes to, there's a lot of sequels on my list, like the second game of a particular franchise. And in this one, it goes to Splatterhouse 2. Splatterhouse 2 was the first Splatterhouse game on the Sega Genesis. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up set in an atmosphere of spooky, creepy monsters and gore. Like, it's really gory. You would never see anything like this on the Super Nintendo. Maybe that's why I'm super fascinated by it, or was, is because you would never see anything like this on Nintendo. And here we have like just crazy, gory, disgusting stuff, like pulsating embryos and splattering, you know, all these monsters and zombies up against the wall. I remember seeing the screenshots of this in GamePro magazine when it was coming out. And I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. But I never got to play it. Soon, fast forward to, you know, when I'm in my early 30s, late 20s, whenever it was, and I was collecting Sega Genesis games, and I came across it, and I played it. But I never actually owned it. I didn't get it until actually, I think MagFest one year, where I did some trading. But man, I was glad to finally actually have it again, be able to play it again, because this is really, really, and I think it was that point, once I started playing it again a few years ago, where I was like, this is one of my favorite Genesis games of all time. It is kind of clunky at times, especially the jumping, when you're jumping over spikes. Especially, it's hard to get that. It's kind of floaty in the jumping, and that is kind of sucky. But for the most part, the gameplay is really fun. It's really great. I really enjoy just beating the crap out of these monsters. It's just satisfying, especially when you have the stick and you just swing it and they go and splatter up against the wall. And the bosses are actually very, very creative. And disgusting. It's a great game. It's a great game. Come in. All right, time for number one on my list, and I have yet to name a lot of classic Genesis games that I'm sure a lot of you absolutely love. And that means that I'm going to be disappointing a lot of you when I don't name your particular game. It's my number 2 beat 'em up of the 16-bit genre outside of Turtles in Time. It's number 2 behind Turtles in Time for any system, and that's Streets of Rage 2. I like me some Streets of Rage, but I love me some Streets of Rage 2. The music is amazing. The graphics are just absolutely amazing. When I'm playing this game, I feel as though I'm in an 80s, cheesy 80s action flick, maybe even a buddy cop movie where I'm just going around in these dark alleys just destroying gang members, what have you. It just puts me in that mood. It's just straight 80s cheese to the max. And I don't know if that's the intent. I'm sure it may be to a degree, but that's what I get out of it. That's the feeling that I get when I play this game. I'm just punching MFers in the face, and it feels so good just hearing their bones shatter beneath my face, seeing their skulls just cave in as I put my fist through it. It is beyond awesome. It is on a stratosphere of cool. It is one of my favorite 16-bit gems of all time. Now, it's a little easier than some of the other beat 'em ups, but that's okay by me. I like that. I hate playing a beat 'em up and being able to only get to like the second stage. And maybe that's because I suck, but I don't care. At least in this game, I can see the later stages. And it's something that you want to do. You want to see the later stages because the game is awesome. You don't want it to end. It just reminds me of that time that I was in an alley and all I had was a pipe and a turkey, and I had to just go through about 10 dudes because they were all trying to kick my ass, and I bashed their freaking skulls in. It reminds me of that. It gives me good memories, all right? It channels my inner rage to be on those streets of rage. It's brilliant. There you have it. There's my top 10 Sega Genesis games of all time. About 80% of the games I've ever played have been on the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo. I just don't have as much experience on the Genesis. You know, I wasn't there as a kid, but it did take me a while to grow up and realize it really all boils down to, hey, let's play some awesome games. It doesn't matter what system it's on. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Click some links below.